We just dropped.
So both numbers are off now. I'm not seeing auto, I'm not seeing.
The technical team is working on that situation. We are having a problem now that both members who are in virtual space are off, and so would lack quorum.
Sorry about that, Mr. Chairman, I'm back.
So let me welcome us once again, and we'll ask MP Member Crawford to just pray for us.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. Almighty God, thank you for bringing us here safely. Thank you for the opportunity for us to meet in this hybrid fashion. As we're about to deliberate on the nation's business, I pray that you grant us strength, wisdom, and tolerance. These are the mercies we ask and thank you for. Through your Son's name, amen.
Thank you very much, Madam. Are there any apologies? Apology for Member Vaz. She is unable to make it this morning. Any other apology? If there is no other apologies, let's go to the welcoming of the members here this morning. Member Hamilton, Member Guy, who finds it necessary to be in person at all times. And so we can always count on Member Guy to be here. I do welcome you, Madam Hamilton, who either in person or virtually, she's always in the meetings. And so, Madam, welcome and thank you for being here with us this morning. I will also say welcome to Member Charles and Member Crawford, who are in virtual space this morning and will be deliberating with us just the same. I will now take it that the minutes of January 26, 2022 was already read, and so we'll move to matters arising from the minutes. Sorry? All right.
There are some corrections, Chairman.
Oh, sorry. Yeah, go ahead.
If I may, my first set, I will move through them, Chairman. Yes, thank you. On just a typo, page 3 of 11, he indicated that spell wrong, but let's move further down. I did some made some comments, Chairman. Okay, one of them is on page 8 of 11, and I want to read a section which deals with Member Guy questioned if professors. I want to start at that paragraph and to the ordinance. Sorry, let's move to Dr. Smith stated that the challenge for the university is that there's an obsolete constitution, statutes, and ordinances. He mentioned that of the 62 ordinances of the university, only Ordinance 8 deals with human resource such as promotion, disciplinary issue, and termination. And then comma, could be negotiated. It doesn't follow there, Chairman. That's very untidy. And I think if I can get some assistance from Member Crawford, who was actually present here, how we could have that corrected to give the proper interpretation of what took place. That's the. Secondly, I'm looking at page 8 of 11, and I'm reading from Member Gaitu, and then he posited that when the university is bound to financial decisions made by one campus, it will not only lead to a failure at that campus. It's not will, it could. So I would want the word will to be removed and could replaced by it. Thirdly, if you go to the paragraph after that, Member Guy stated that there were various models in how universities appoint professors and noted that the traditional British model and American model. He expressed a view that over the years the university had been straddling, not struggling, straddling between both models. So could we have that corrected as well, Chairman? The page 11 of 11, and this is Member Hamilton now, she noted that it was unfair for the campuses to be putting university in liability without having knowledge of the decisions to prepare for the financial aspects of same. Dr. Smith stated that the structures that the report recommended, which were reviewed by the review committee to be presented to council, will prevent and correct the type. I think it should be these types of issues going forward instead of just the type. And those are my comments, corrections there, Chair.
Thank you, Member Guy. Noted by recording clerk. Member Hamilton.
Yes, Chair, sorry, I had reviewed mine on my device, so I'm trying to locate on the sheet what pages I had some issues. Just give me a minute. Okay, there's some amendment that is required on page 10. So the first sentence on page 10 that starts, having learned that each campus had each campus had the autonomy to implement projects. That Member Hamilton asks at what point each campus would report to the council. I've realized that the response that came from that question is a bit too far in the minutes. And so where it has been identified, and that now is in the second paragraph at 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7, 8, the 9th line, and it starts, Dr. Smith stated that it was not correct to say that there was no reporting by the campuses. I believe that sentence should follow where I previously had mentioned or requested information about reporting. Where it is placed now, it makes it a bit haphazard, and so it doesn't follow in that paragraph. So it's just to remove that response and place it further up.
Thank you, Member. So noted. We'll make sure that those corrections are made. Any other correction to the minutes?
There was something else. Looking for it. another one. 1 minute, Chair. There was another one, Chair. I'm just looking for it.
Dr. Charles, Member Crawford, are there any correction to the minutes coming from your side?
No, Mr. Chairman, I didn't see anything that I thought needed to be corrected.
Okay, thank you. Still waiting on Member Hamilton.
The device at top there.
Chair, what I will do is we could proceed, and then when I find the change, I will make a note of it.
All right, so be it. At this time, can we have the confirmation of the minutes?
Pending the amendment. So moved, Chair.
Seconded by Member Guy.
Seconded.
Matters arising from the minutes. At this time, we'll ask the members from the technocrats from the ministry and agency to come on the inside.
The report, the draft report. Oh, you're going by the minutes. Okay. Okay.
Good morning.
Oh, you don't want. Thank you.
At this time, we'll ask that members from the ministry and agency to introduce themselves, please.
Thank you, Sir Chair. My name is Gary Rowe, Commissioner of Corrections.
Good morning, Chair and members. Shauna Trowers, Chief Technical Director at the Ministry of National Security.
Good morning, members. My name is Claudette Hamilton, Director of Juvenile Services with the Department of Correctional Services.
Chairman, there's a muffling. Could you speak into the mic so we can hear?
Good morning, everyone. My name is Rochelle Daly, Manager at Risk Youth.
No, Ms. Hamilton, I didn't hear what you said you were.
Claudette Hamilton, Director of Juvenile Services.
Okay. Chairman, I again...
Before you go, member, online we would have had Dr. Mark Thomas, Deputy Commissioner, and Mrs. Althea Davis, Senior Director, Resource Management. Go ahead, member.
Chairman, as was said at the last meeting that we had, the people from Ministry of National Security, and whereas I understand the concern of the Permanent Secretary in not being able to be here today, I think it is an affront to the community, to the committee, for the accounting officer not to be present. And I'm going to insist that in future, from my perspective, that any of the accounting officers, i.e. the permanent secretaries, who do not avail themselves to come to this committee, that we do not sit unless they come. I think it is gone a bit too far, Chairman.
I agree with you, because there are questions that they alone would be in a position to answer, and we do need answers. So going forward, we will send the necessary...
Chair, if I may, it is unfair to these officers because the Commissioner can't determine how much is to come to him. Right? He works with what he gets. And it is for the permanent secretary to say XYZ, why commissioner or why any other entity cannot get the subvention that is required.
Noted, and we'll definitely act upon it.
Mr. Chairman?
Go ahead.
Yes, I just want to put on the record that I support Dr. Guy's position regarding the importance of the need for the permanent secretary to be at the sitting, either virtually or in-house. Otherwise, we really shouldn't meet to deliberate.
Member Hamilton, do you have a comment?
Well, Chair, I would love to see how the discussion proceeds today based on questions that we would have from the report that was submitted to us, and whether or not the officers in front of us are able to respond adequately to our questions. So we will see.
Member Charles. At this time, we'll ask Mr. Rowe. At this time, sir, would you want to make your report?
Yes, Sir Chair. Thank you very much. I'd like to begin by just giving a quick overview of the department, and then I'll lead from there into the request of our last sitting on the 9th of November, 2021. The DSS is an agency, is a department under the Ministry of National Security, which in 1975, by virtue...
I'm sorry, my microphone was not working. I apologize.
By virtue of an administrative merger, of 3 entities: the Jamaica Prison Services, the Probation Aftercare Services, and approved schools that form the Department of Correctional Services. The DCS has a mandate to rehabilitate adults and child offenders in custody, those on non-custodial orders also in the wider community. The population under the purview of the department is distributed across 11 correctional institutions, 4 of which are for our children. The organization also serves non-custodial offenders who are on community court orders, and they are serviced across 16 probation offices throughout the island. Also, to put it in perspective, over 6,660 offenders are being served by the DCS, who also manages the sex offender registry. So if I narrow down to the juvenile services as to why we're here, 4 juvenile correctional centers in Jamaica serve, as of this morning, 152 children between the ages of 12 to 18 years old, either on correctional order or remand order. If I break the 4 institutions down even further, for boys, the centers at Hilltop Juvenile Correctional Center, built in the 1960s, a former military base in Bamboo St. Anne, had a capacity of 98. And I say had a capacity, as Hilltop was closed in October 2021, and the children transferred to Rio Cobre Juvenile Correctional Center in Tredegar Park, St. Catherine. The Hilltop facility was crumbling, the roof falling down, and it became considered to be unsafe for the further accommodation in that condition for our children. Rio Cobre, built in the 1950s, now stands with a capacity of 100 for our medium remand boys. We have 32 accommodated. And for the capacity on the other dorm where we house our Hilltop boys, that's a capacity of 32. We presently house 15. And the Rio Cobre facility is in a much better condition than what Hilltop was in. Metcalf Street is another facility for our boys, more of a remand reception institution. That was built in the 1980s, which is a concrete prefabricated apartment block, which has been retrofitted and renovated and repurposed to house 196. Presently, we have 66 boys held there. I would like to highlight here that so far, as I have gone through, none of these facilities are purpose-built for what they're presently being used for. They're retrofitted and renovated accordingly. And antiquated original designs, as you can imagine, we have to be very creative at times to make sure we maintain basic humanitarian standards. For the girls, we have South Camp Juvenile Correctional Center. That was built in the 1970s, and it may resonate more on our minds as the former gun court. The South Camp Juvenile Center for Girls occupy a portion of that compound. Again, not purpose-built, but retrofitted to accommodate 144 girls. Presently, we have 39 accommodated. We must also realize that the offenses for which our children are held for vary. Not to name most of them here, but major offenses as serious as we can imagine, down to just being uncontrollable. But in keeping with the DCS mandate to rehabilitate as best for reintegration, several programs are offered to our children during their confinement with us. The programs include academics, vocational training, psychosocial interventions, life skills training, spiritual enrichment, all directed at reintegration opportunities. So with the concerns of the infrastructure not being purpose-built, the DCS continues to stay the course in terms of what our core responsibilities are. But also, Sir Chair, the DCS and our parent ministry have remained focused and stayed the course, certainly following a certain report from one of our key stakeholders in for a period July to September 2020. Technical working groups were created. As part of the focus given to the technical working groups, the infrastructure of our juvenile institutions was a main heading that was dissected. And this was not an academic exercise, because from this study, a roadmap for the juvenile rehabilitation was crafted, and it informed our priorities, our policies, strategies, plans, and programs to even suggest infrastructural changes going forward. The infrastructural headings, I totaled about 18 different areas that were looked at and recommendations made. Headings such as accommodation, ventilation and lighting, health and safety, administrative spaces, security catering, right down to garbage collection and disposal. From here, 158 recommendations. 158 recommendations. All actionable items were pulled out from this technical working group exercise. And the actionable items were further apportioned within a short, medium, long-term categorization. Short, medium, long-term in terms of prioritization for our future spending as a department and future budgetary allocation, certainly from our parent ministry. So with that said, Sir Chair, coming to why we are here this morning, the sitting of the 9th of November, where DCS shared some of the activities that we were conducting, we were encouraged to share also what are some of our challenges. What are some of our challenges, although we continue to navigate within our practical space? So we pulled out a few big-ticket concerns, Sir Chair, which we believe create common threads throughout the rehabilitation effort, which, if not resolved post-haste, will hobble the rehabilitation efforts for reintegration of our children, for whom the nation has a duty of care. I pulled out 7 main concerns, Sir Chair. Not to say this is exhaustive, but certainly which I believe the committee would find interesting and possibly be able to help us alleviate some of the delays we're having. The first one, we looked at the aged, dilapidated buildings that were not purpose-built. That remains a concern. Lack of structured education systems to deliver the standard education programs for our age cohort. The limited resources and the challenges faced by the department in obtaining certification of some of our vocational and skills programs. The absence of an established psychosocial capability to effectively address the growing needs in terms of the psychosocial intervention among our wards. the difficulty our children have when they leave our facilities in reintegrating in their communities and in the public school system upon the expiration of their stay with us. IT limitations remain, even more so as we emerge from a fourth wave of COVID, and the demand on that technology platform. And one of our institutions, in terms of the location, which is thought may not be the best influence for our boys, namely Metcalf Street. Right, sir. So I am prepared to take them one by one, but I'm open to the committee if there's any questions up to this point.
Chair, thank you very much. Good morning, Commissioner.
Morning, sir.
All members of your team. I listened to the extensive preamble to what you gave and but just something that struck me as very relevant, and you will recall earlier in the deliberations I asked about the permanent secretary's presence. Your committee has come with 158 recommendations for improvement. Question is, how many have been implemented so far? And secondly, these recommendations would have gone to the Ministry of National Security. What has been the response of the Ministry of National Security? What has been the indication to your department based on how you have the timelines given to the immediate, short-term, long-term? What is the response to your recommendations as to how quickly they'll be implemented? So if you could give the committee a insight into that, it would be appreciated.
Thank you, Sir Member. The points as the recommendations as pulled out by those technical working groups, those working groups were convened by my parent ministry, and certainly I don't have the figure here, but a lot of the short-term recommendations was a spin-off from the Indicom Quarterly, and most, I will not say all, but I would have to check, but most of those short-term recommendations specific to Rio Cobre have been already implemented. The technical working groups did not only look at Rio Cobre, they looked at all juvenile facilities. So we're still working through on some other locations. But I can say decisively for Rio Cobre, most of those short-term recommendations were corrected.
And
but
sorry, and that is particularly because Rio Cobre was in a position where they were considered...
They
featured, and
yes.
You will recall my question about the Indicom report.
Right, sir.
So I understand the need to have those done.
Right, sir.
But as you have quite correctly said, Rio Cobre is not the full sum of the centers that you have to deal with. And whereas that one was the one that came to national attention based on the Indicom report, right, I'm sure that there are other deficiencies that need immediate attention in the other ones as well. So whereas those have been addressed, are you still unhappy with the fact that other areas have not been given the attention? I mean, we are all mindful of the budgetary constraints, but right. You know, there are certain standards, as you indicated in a prior report, that the BCS tries to maintain, and certainly some of them are not necessarily being adhered to now because of the same issues and concerns that you spoke to just now. So are you unhappy that they are not there yet for the other ones? And we're glad that Rio Cobre has been given some amount of attention.
Right, sir.
But the other ones are of concern to us as well. So have you made the necessary deep representation or deeper representation to have those corrections effected?
Yes, sir. Thank you, sir. And before I invite my Chief Technical Director, Ms. Chowers, it's not about being unhappy, sir, member. I believe all of my team in the DCS, we understand there will never be a perfect situation that we get everything we want. But we continue on the course. We stay the course because we believe, although the circumstances can improve, until it improves, it can still be managed. So we continue to manage in our space, appreciating not just our financial imperatives and priorities, but the wider national security imperatives. And we appreciate that we are competing for the same pie. We are encouraged. We continue to work in the space we have. We continue to maintain it, although antiquated. But we are assured that we will get an opportunity to make those improvements, if not all at the same time, over a period of time once we have a program and a plan in place. And with these recommendations identified, I believe that's half of the journey in terms of realizing what needs to be done. It just needs to be structured now, whether over a 1-year plan or 2-year plan, depending on, again, the fiscal space that we have. But if I may, sir, member, Ms. Chowers, I believe also from her seat at the MNS, could maybe give a little bit more clarity to that, to that answer.
Thank you, Commissioner. Morning again, members. So, Member Guy, you noted that, yes, the Ministry of National Security is fully on board. In fact, the Correctional Services Working Group was chaired by myself, and it had a composite of private sector and MDAs. My co-chair was Mrs. Jacqueline Samuels Brown, formerly of Armadale, so we took particular interest in looking at 3 core areas, and I'm just giving this background for the committee. We looked at the psychosocial, we looked at the infrastructure, and we looked at the legal. In terms of the legal, the ministry is committed in terms of providing for the youth offender strategy, which we're working at, and a wider comprehensive approach to the legislative. But I think your concern mainly would be the infrastructure in terms of how the wards are held, and secondly, how the psychosocial is dealt with, which is more important. So in terms of the infrastructure, as the Commissioner alluded to, we had pitched it in terms of an action plan, short, medium, and long term. Unfortunately, the DCS had a limited capital spend over the last year due to the pandemic, and so what the focus was on the short-term initiatives, mainly Ria Cobra, as was noted. Commissioner, I would back him up by saying we're about 85% completed. At my last check, we committed to do what you call a structural engineering review, looking at all the entities, not only the juveniles, and so that is in the procurement process. As of yesterday, when I got a report, I expect that by, I would say, mid-year, not fiscal year, calendar year. So we're looking at June 2021 that we will recognize where we're at with that. 2022. Thank you very much. 2022.
Before you, sorry. Are you through?
No, but you can go ahead, Chair. Should I go ahead? Oh.
Mic is still on. That's why I'm asking. Go ahead.
All right. And so for the medium term, we're plotting the medium term for 1 to 3 years. Long term would be about to 5 years. A part of it and our concern is the fiscal. and how to treat with it. So we are seeking to do more renovations where we can. As Commissioner indicated, it was in our best interest to consolidate the activities from Hilltop to Rio Cobre so that we could therefore provide for combined services for the wards in a better facility. In terms of the psychosocial, which I think is very integral, there has been some interim measures put in. Some of them we applaud the DCS. So we've had a partnership with our private sector. Namely, we'd have Conversations for Greatness where JMMB, one of the private sector, assisted. We have our We Transform. I think at the last sitting, Ms. Garty would have given a little insight that we have provided for the wards through that facility and through increased psychologists. There is a program that the DCS has implemented for the psychosocial called Motivational Groove, which looks at, and maybe Ms. Hamilton, when given the chance, can speak more to it. It has been implemented at Rio Cobre, and the boys are exposed to videos that are positive imagery, and it allows for them to be interactive, and they're a part of the sessions. So I just want to indicate that the Ministry of National Security is in partnership with the DCS and is committed to address the concerns.
Sorry, Member Crawford, your hand was up.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. I have two questions to the Commissioner. Having listened to his report and having read the report myself, what I want to know, I'm interested in the recommendation which states that the Ministry of Education should assume full responsibility for the educational programs. My question is, what steps have DCS or its parent ministry taken to ensure that this becomes a reality? And two, are there any existing MOUs for educational programs between the DCS, its parent ministry, and the Ministry of Education and any of its agencies? Agencies of the Ministry of Education, that is.
I'll answer.
Chair, can I also add a rider to the question? In the report, as was indicated by Member Crawford, the recommendations were made about the Ministry of Education and Youth undertaking the educational aspect of the program there. But I see in the report too that there are some challenges with the Heart Trust NSTA certification. And my understanding of it, even as it relates to us as members of Parliament, is that Heart is prepared to go into the communities, and certainly DCS will be considered a community. So there ought not to be a challenge in getting Heart Trust to do the certification programs in the institutions, because they provide, as far as I recall, not only the personnel to do the training, but they will also assist to upgrade some of the facilities as well to give that type of training. So I think a more greater outreach needs, or reach out, to Heart Trust NTA to get them actively involved in the program, so that this particular concern ought not to be a constraint as is reported in the report here.
And just to add to Dr. Guy, one of my reasons for asking that particular question, when I served at Heart Trust NTA JFLL before the merger as Director of Educational Services, and I'm happy that Dr. Mark Thomas is online because he could speak to that. I know we had an MOU and we entered into partnership where we delivered the HSDE program, the High School Diploma Equivalency Program in the adult correctional facilities. And as the director at JFLL/Heart, what we did a trainer program where we trained the facilitators and we paid teachers to go in. So I'm very surprised to see this kind of recommendation. So that is why I want to know, what is DCS doing, and are there any existing MOUs?
Okay, thank you. quite a few there. Let me take the first point raised by Ms. Hamilton. The academic program offered within the DCS is administered by civilian staff. Now, the establishment speaks to our teachers being qualified at a certificate level. That is on our job description and our terms of reference when we're recruiting. So what we have found within the DCS is that the wider qualification of teachers now graduating speaks to a BSc level. But our pay scale has not changed. So where we have a high attrition rate among our teachers, vacant posts remain unfilled for quite a long time. In fact, between 2008 and 2019, 16 teachers resigned. We have 48 teaching posts, 18 are filled, 30 are vacant. So we have gone through the discussions in terms of, do we look at just requesting an upgrade within the DCS teacher category, or should we be on a wider platform with Ministry of Education? Those discussions had begun. I believe it was early 2020. We had meetings with the Minister of Education, plus our Minister without portfolio at the time, and we began those discussions to see how to bring the allowances and the salary package in alignment with the wider Ministry of Education pay scale, so that our teachers within the DCS also benefit. But then came COVID, and that has been sort of put to the side shelf, seeing what we have been doing, trying to manage the whole COVID pandemic over the past 2 years. We are hopeful that we can resume that dialogue with Ministry of Education, and Dr. Thomas has already reached out to initiate those continued discussions, how to bring our teachers on board, at least at a baseline equivalent with their counterparts within wider society, but also the possibility for incentive to work in the space. Separate and apart from a high school separate and apart from school out there in the civilian world, the space that our teachers have to work within the DCS, we believe some additional consideration should be made as an incentive to encourage the right qualification to come and interact with our wards. So those discussions are being revived by Dr. Thomas, and he has already reached out to Ministry of Education to look at that. We do have an MOU with HEART, and where we have interacted with HEART, ultimately it is our facilities, our infrastructure that has to be upgraded so that the qualification and the standards are met when we conduct those HEART-type courses within our institutions. Again, that speaks to upgrades within our workshops, infrastructure improvements, which we are working through as well. But the dialogue continues with HEART, and HEART has always been a valuable partner leading up to and prior to the pandemic. Coming on the back end where we are now, 4 waves later, we are hopeful to re-energize those partnerships. But I thought it prudent to raise here, since our esteemed committee members had offered to give us a little more firepower, no pun intended, to push that integration with Ministry of Education now on the back end of the pandemic, to push that integration with HEART now on the back end of the pandemic, so that we can get back on track and pick up where we left off.
We understand your antecedent, Commissioner, so you don't have to say no pun intended.
And just to make it known that I have noted the 7 challenges that you have listed here, and we will do everything from our point of the committee to help you to create more firepower. No pun intended.
I'm confident, sir, Chair.
And because truth be told is that it is our belief that the government of the day has the responsibility for these youngsters, and so we must do everything in our power to make them accessible and marketable when they leave those the institution under our care. So we'll definitely be doing what needs to be done. Let me at this time welcome member Angela Brownberg and member Crystal Lee. MP Hamilton.
Yes, sir, thank you. Commissioner, I listened to your response just now in relation to the issues you have with the recruitment of teachers and retention. While I do appreciate that COVID would have delayed action, I believe with COVID, the issue would have been exacerbated, because with 30 positions vacant, I would love to know how many juveniles are impacted by that that lacuna that exists within the DCS, the educational system. But also, I believe that within the last 2 years, a little bit more than discussion could have taken place to, certain steps to bring salaries within the DCS up to par with that of public schools. Whatever interventions that could have been made could have started. Because I see where for 2 years then, the juveniles would have been at a disadvantage where education is concerned. I read in the report that there is no established structure to facilitate upward mobility of teachers, but what I want to know is whether there is a structure at all, and who do these teachers report to, for instance. And what happens to these juveniles, or those juveniles who are not being served by the 30 vacant positions that exist?
Right, you have a bundle there. I'm wondering where to begin. The pandemic was an inconvenience, yes, let me start there. But it also created an opportunity where we began to leverage technology a lot better. We had our teachers who also had comorbidities and concerns, even not knowing what the comorbidities are, just the concern of coming out, and had to be offering online classes. We continued online classes as best we could within our facilities, but I make no apologies. It was all about preventing the spread of COVID and keeping separation where the wards already live in a dormitory setting. So we tried to reduce the outbreaks within our facilities. Something had to give. And it had reached a point where I took a decision that teachers were not allowed in to interact because of COVID. And where classes were available, our teachers were available, we went to online as best we could. Again, we had to improvise, we had to implement. Some of the internet connectivity issues still plague us to this day. As close as we are to the business capital, South Camp Road, connectivity is a problem. And then it speaks to the cost. So we had a number of priorities we had to look at. Throughout the last 2 years, things were slowed, bearing in mind the operational imperative was we do not want COVID in our institutions. And where we had an outbreak, we had to cauterize it as quickly as possible. Our juvenile facilities had a fair amount of outbreaks where everything had to be shut down also. So it seems like 2 years has passed, and why didn't we do this, why didn't we do that? But it was a very busy 2 years, even though you looked at it. And as best as possible, we interacted with our children. We afforded classes that were available, teachers who were available. We introduced, for example, homegrown initiatives so that we kept on interacting with our wards and kept them distracted from the main problem, the main issues. So that was something that operationally a decision had to be made. It was not business as usual in terms of classes.
So, yeah, could you just, in relation to the structure, what structure is there?
Before you go to the structure, there is something,
yes,
Commissioner, that is concerning.
All right, Member Crawford hand was up. So
no, it's on the same. It's on the same.
Oh,
it's
on the same point to Dr. Guy. Back to my first question where you mentioned about Hart still being in the facility. As a follow-up to MP's Hamilton question about supervision, I want to know if all the educational programs, are they only offered via Hart, or is there other programs? So those who are not a part of the Hart programs, or is it that Hart is the only educational institution that offers training in the DCS?
Have I answered yours completely? Ms.
No, you haven't. But
right,
but based on that question from MP Crawford, I was of the opinion that Hart is not within the DCS juvenile facilities at all. Or am I wrong?
There are certain vocational opportunities we offer to our wards. We do woodwork, we do mechanics, and where we can partner with Hart on some of those in terms of accreditation and qualification for the wards, we do engage with Hart on those. We have correctional officers also who are qualified in certain skill sets, and they fill those gaps for the teachers, for the civilian teachers from time to time, who also share their experience with the wards.
So it's not Hart facilitators that provide training, by and large?
It's a blend. It would be a blend. We have teachers who come in who are qualified through Hart. We have engagement with Hart, who provide facilitators depending on the project we're on. And we have correctional officers who also are qualified, who fill as teachers from time to time.
So a follow-up from that, because
yes,
in your report you mentioned that you had a challenge with the Hart certification for various workshops. Could you explain what the actual issue is where that is concerned?
Right. So if we look at the wood workshop, and this is just in my words, the shop has to be equipped with certain basic equipment to be even considered a suitable training space. There are certain trade skills that have to be practiced. If we don't have the equipment, you can't say that you tick that box and you're qualified in it. Similarly for mechanics, similarly for welding, and so on. So we may have a space that within the DCS we say this is the carpentry shop. But do we have the lathe? Do we have the turner? Do we have the joiner? Do we have the saw, the equipment? Those are some of the realities we face, that to get certification, we need to be in a recognized, properly tooled shop to then say we can exercise the qualifications and the practice required.
So with all these deficiencies within workshops, was Hart engaged any at all to assist with rectifying these issues, bringing the workshops up to standard?
Well, the last point we had reached, I know Hart combined with our skills team and identified what the shortfalls were. It was really then up to DCS in their court to work that strategy to equip the space.
But from my recollection, Commissioner, I am sure HART provides that kind of assistance.
Right.
And I'm sure that they would be more than willing to give the DCS some support in that regard, especially, you know, based on, as you said, the challenges you have where resources are concerned. It is the best entity to provide that assistance. So maybe you, going forward, can explore that possibility, because...
Just to add to that, when I served at HART and we had the program in the facility, what I know for sure, apart from paying the teachers, and of course we paid all the teachers who worked in any of the correctional facilities, they were paid more than the teachers we paid in the traditional settings. And we provided all of the material, the resources, and all the devices and whatever else needed to be provided. So that is why I'm a bit taken aback and asking Commissioner what steps has been taken to get this kind of support, because I know that the resources are available, but DCS also must take responsibility to help us, to help you. And you spoke about the blend, so that means there's a combination of teachers from HART and elsewhere. I know that the teachers from HART, for sure, that they are supervised by HART, the parish managers and the responsible officers who would check the lesson plans for the teachers in the different programs right across the island. So those teachers in the facilities who are not from HART, are not a part of any of the HART program, who supervises them, who pays them, who checks the lesson plan, where are the resources, the material, where do those things come from for those who are not a part of the HART program and are not provided for through the facilities of HART?
My question, though, is that I've listened to Commissioner and I've heard you mention that there be the equipment, so to speak, and all the equipment that you spoke of are electrically driven. But what about those, and it might sound archaic, but what about those manual pieces of tools that we used to use long before the electrical driven? Because again, if I know what HART does, they have different levels of accomplishment. And so the youngsters that are coming out, if we don't have the electrical driven tools, it still does not take away from the fact that we can use a manual tool to assess that ward to say whether or not he is competent in the different fields. So it is still a bit mind-boggling to say the least. Why is it there is a challenge with your department, agency, and HART, who has the responsibility to assess and to certify youngsters not only in the correctional services, but right across Jamaica where it is necessary? And I believe, it is my opinion, that we can always draft or create a program that will fit in the best interest of what we have. So whilst we would be waiting on the electrical driven tools and equipment, we still can have a program that the youngsters can be assessed and certified.
Right. Thank you, Sir Chair. Let me say that the DCS continues to fine-tune and practice the best practices. We continue to engage our partners. HART has always been there and is willing to engage us. We are moving forward now post 2020. The DCS had certainly been doing, I won't say self-help, but we have been keeping the wards occupied constructively, but nothing takes away the fact that it's all about a qualification, and that is where our partner comes in. So we continue to engage and move forward with that engagement. Hopefully we can come to the best way forward for our wards.
I am not worried about the fact that those who are in authority at the DCS, that you keep the wards active in the best interest of them. What I am concerned about is how we get them to join the community when you would release them after they have served their time. Because one of the ways that society will accept you is by way of how productive you are or would be to society, coming back into society. And so if a mechanic who would have been in your care for a time comes back into society, he has something to offer to society. And so we need at all times to make sure that when they're leaving with something that is able to allow them to market themselves and to provide for themselves just the same for society to accept them back in society. I noted that
Chair.
Dr. Charles, Member Charles. And
before another question is possibly asked, because I asked the question in relation to the structure. Member Crawford asked about the structure, but we still have not received a response. The structure for the teachers, who do they report to? We would love to know the answer to that.
Right. The structure within the DCS, we have an education coordinator, and the teachers fall under the rehabilitation division, who ultimately, the head of the rehabilitation division, rehabilitation and probation aftercare is the proper term for that area, would be the main person that the teachers interact with.
I find it a little strange and curious as well that the interface with the minister responsible for education is not really there. And I would have thought that in the process of trying to educate, there at least is some basic format that is followed. There is some sharing of best practices. There is the use of the curriculum in terms of what is to be utilized, unless that is so, and we're not getting that from the commissioner. But that is basically along the lines that we want to get the information. But if I may, I was asking to speak earlier on before Member Crawford came in, and Commissioner, your response to Member Hamilton about the teachers and the resignation and the unfilled posts. And you indicated, and we all agree, that COVID-19 has something to do with it. There were challenges as well as opportunities. But if I am to go by the report that you have submitted to the Parliament, there's a high attrition rate among teachers. The vacant posts remain unfilled for long periods. Between 2018 and 2019, 16 teachers resigned. Now that was pre-COVID. So how do you explain, against the background of the question she asked, the 16 teachers resigning and the vacancy that existed prior to COVID, considering the concerns that the teachers have about their own comorbid conditions and so, because we are in a deep crisis, right? It is very, very deep, because even without the pandemic, we had the teachers resigning. And I see here that you say that the program is administered by civilian staff trained and certified at the bachelor's science level. Are all of those who you have, the 18 that are there and the 30 that you are hoping to get, are all certified at the BSc level? That's another question as well. But the issue is really a serious one, and I am in agreement with my colleagues here who are seeking to see whether there have been serious approaches made to get the remuneration up to par with the Ministry of Education in terms of employment as well, terms and conditions of employment. because, I mean, you can't have teachers. They are certified to be teachers and are teaching at a level which, one, cannot attract the remuneration that they get at the public schools. Two, they do not have the perks that come with the job and the breaks as well. So, I mean, it is an indictment, if I may say, on the Correctional Services and the Ministry of National Security in not ensuring that the type of education that you would want to afford to those students is on par with what obtains in the level at which they are were they not in the correctional institution.
Right. Let me clarify though that although the grade of our teachers may not be on par, we do have wards who are afforded opportunity to sit CSEC, and we have had successes throughout the period. Where we have our academics and we may not have a full complement of teachers in that regard, there are other engaging activities that we believe is part of the development of the ward for the reintegration process, where we speak to, for example, practicum students. We partnered with MICO that afforded counseling and life skills training. That's another dimension, more so along the psychosocial development of our wards, separate and apart from just academics. Ministry of Health has also been partnered in and provide programs on substance abuse, gender violence. That's factored into the curriculum of our children. Multi-care youth foundation initiatives have been incorporated. And we have a number of other partners who bring those valuable life experiences as well as mental health and well-being type interaction for our wards, which is just as critical as the academic piece in also along the journey of that rehabilitation opportunity for proper reintegration.
Commissioner, while I appreciate the importance of life skills and soft skills and all of that, I'm still not getting the feeling that the gravamen of the situation is being addressed. The issue is that teachers are underpaid and overworked. That's what I get from the report. That has to be addressed. There is no way around that issue. And so what I wanted to get out today is that, the urgency is identified, steps will be taken, whatever applications need to be made through whatever ministries are undertaken to ensure that this is addressed, because it is, to me, a priority. The reintegration with all the soft skills will not be as effective if the academics are not on par.
And before you go, Commissioner, I'm sorry to belabor the point, but I think it needs to be belabored. Member Hamilton, in her last sentence was on point, the education. So even though we have made provisions for the psychosocial and the Ministry of Health and the psychiatrists and the psychologists and all the other support mechanisms that are there, at the end of their sojourn at these institutions, what do they come into society with? How are they reintegrated? And it would be very instructive, Commissioner, if a study was done to ascertain how many of these persons who were wards of the state at these juvenile correctional centers, when they leave, what happens to them? Have they become part of the criminal activity in this country, they wouldn't be reoffenders then. They're some criminals because they might not be there for the same thing. So it would be instructive to know, because in the absence of a core skill or some amount of education, what we're going to find is that our youngsters who we are trying to rehabilitate have not benefited from rehabilitation. They have just gone to spend time at the hotel, at any one of the 4 centers that you have, right? They're gone, what we used to call it, they're gone a reformatory or a reform school, or famatory, as we used to call it in the early days. So the purpose of these correctional centers is, one, yes, they have done something that they need to be separated from the community and society for a while, but they have to be reintegrated at the end of the day. So my simple question is, and I agree with my colleague to my right here, what measures are there to ensure that at the end of their sojourn there, that they have something that they can come back in society with and be active contributors to the society, instead of potentially becoming another ward of the state in a, as I used the last time, big prison?
Before you answer, Commissioner, there are 2 other members who would like to ask question, Dr. Charles and then Dr. Brownberg, and then you can answer all the questions.
Thank you, Chairman. Can you hear me?
We're hearing
Chairman,
you.
can you hear me?
Yes, we're hearing you.
Good morning, everyone. Chairman, through you, Commissioner, I see that you're partnering with several other organizations, but have you considered partnering with teachers' colleges and possibly using student teachers in the meantime, like, for example, on an externship? Because having 30 vacant posts, that's very concerning to me. So I would like you to consider that.
Thank you, ma'am. Certainly we will. I know we have dialogue with Michael and other stakeholders. So that's certainly a valid direction.
Good morning, everybody. Chairman, through you to Commissioner, I wanted to go back to some of the questions that were being asked by, I think it was members Crawford, and I don't remember who else was there, but there are 2 other persons discussing that. When I read the report, I am a little, I don't want to, I'm a little concerned, to put it mildly, about this, what the report says, or what I infer from the report in terms of how we see these wards of the state. It would. I refuse to believe that that institutions of this nature cannot get a proper partnership with HEART in terms of those skills program. I know that I have seen HEART offer several modalities and several programs to members in the society that could fit squarely with this population and the age cohort. And so it bothers me that DCS could not find a working program solution with HEART to be able to meet the needs of these children. So that's one. I couple that also, the point made by Member Charles about the number of vacant teachers. But more than that, just the fact that we have an institution that believes it is okay to pay teachers at the diploma level, although we are employing those who have a bachelor's. What does that say to the individuals who are there? Understanding also the conditions under which they work, which would have been different from working in a school, without the possibility for mobility in terms of holidays and all of that. And so I probably want to go there in terms of the ethos of DCS and how we see our our children and how we see our teachers there. It's worrisome, to say the least.
Thank you. Thank you, member. DCS sees of those concerns, and that is why we have started that dialogue with Ministry of Education. We believe it's about time that we have those open discussions, put our cards on the table, and just look at the practical way forward for our educational standard within DCS. As it stands now, the DCS establishment speaks to a certain pay scale for our teachers, and those are the scales that we are compelled to work with until the review is complete. As I said, engagements have begun through the rehabilitation divisional commander, Dr. Thomas, and he has already engaged Ministry of Education to get back on track with how to regularize the situation we have within DCS.
Chair, despite the fact that I'm still not comfortable with where we are with the programs and teachers, I wanted to go to the infrastructure section of the report. There was mention made there of space being required to effectively separate children, the younger from the older, for protection from abuse. What type of abuses are we talking about here among the juveniles?
Okay. Bearing in mind we have the wards coming in with different offenses under their belt, different experiences. We have a cross-section of society in our institutions. And I think similar to any school environment, you have boys and girls with different type of personalities. Within our correctional institutions for our wards, we are faced with similar possibilities. So, you know, you have bullying that could possibly take place. You have ways and means in terms of the wards creating their own cliques and turning on another.
When you say cliques, you mean gangs?
Pardon?
When you say cliques, are you referring to gangs per se?
Well, I'm just saying, you know, you may have wards who create friendships in the space and therefore they don't like other persons they see for whatever reason. As I said, typical bullying, it may range to even fights among themselves. You know, boys will fight, the girls will fight. Again, it may stem from bullying. But the personalities will differ, and there are occasions you need to separate and create that space.
So with the challenges that you have now, how are these issues addressed?
Well, if I make reference to the present occupancy level, we try to ensure we have spare spaces that we can change wards between accommodations. We could rearrange the sleeping arrangement. There may be some common spaces that they have to share, but they're under closer supervision. When they retire to sleep in the evenings, again, how we separate those type of persons who are more aggressive from who are maybe not as aggressive, that type of thing. Mm-hmm.
Chair, I think the last time the DCS was there, I'd mentioned that maybe the committee could benefit from a site visit to these juvenile facilities. I'm going to make another call for some kind of visit to be done by the committee I think it will help us to understand a little bit more what happens within these facilities. So whatever advocacy we can provide, it is with knowledge of what is actually happening. But, Commissioner, we also had the child diversion unit the last time we were here. And the report that you provided, I realized that, yes, you do have some infrastructural issues, but I realize that you're not at full capacity within the facilities. I wanted to know whether or not you foresee the child diversion program having any kind of impact whatsoever on some of these issues, especially infrastructural issues, in the future. Because the child diversion program should really limit the number of juveniles coming to you. So is there any kind of collaboration going on between your entity, the child diversion program, to address some of the concerns that we have now?
Right. We have our Deputy Commissioner, Dr. Thomas, who sits on that committee. I believe it's at the Ministry of Justice. He has been interacting with them, and he has visibility in terms of the initiatives with regard to the child diversion process. But certainly we would have to continue that dialogue, which has been on track. The DCS has been kept abreast in terms of what the child diversion initiatives have been.
Chair, we're just trying to figure out if Dr. Thomas is online. Maybe he could respond.
Yes, he's online. Sure. You would like to pose a question?
I would love for him to give his input.
Dr. Thomas? Okay.
Good morning, everybody.
Morning.
Well, let me address a few things from before, because I think the committee was stuck a little bit on what happened in the juvenile facilities. So let me make it absolutely clear. At this very moment, every single child is engaged. Every single child is engaged in academics. The vast majority of the children have reading issues, or not that they should. So many are engaged in learning to read, write, mathematics, social studies, etc. Then what happens as well, after lunch, you may have a vocational program.
Could you hold for me, Doc? Doc, you're asked to remove your mask because it is muffling. Yes, go ahead.
Yeah, so I just wanted to make that clear because I don't think that was clear to the committee. So the gaps that we have now, the issue is this, that since the assessment was done by Hartrust NT, and the vast majority of our workspaces can't accommodate the full NVQJ. But as Member Crawford mentioned, we have had a long-standing partnership with Hartrust NT. We have teachers trained in terms of delivering HSDE. So with the juveniles now, those who can read are engaged in CSEC subjects, vocational training, as well as academic subjects. The issue is with the teachers, the gaps that we have is that we can't expand the number of offerings that we have because of the absence of the teachers. So we want to have teach electronics or expand the auto mechanics, but we just simply don't have the teachers. That is what happens. So we in the proverbial sense to turn around and make fashion, we utilize the teachers that we have. We want dedicated life skills teachers, but we just simply have none right now. So the teachers on staff, they again give up themselves, go the extra mile, and provide some life skills training guided by our partners, etc. So everybody is covered. We just want to expand. And then if we have the tools and the equipment, we will expand the offering to full NVQJ. But if right now all you can do is make a bed, then that's what you learn, how to make a bed, and then you have that skill set to start the process on the outside, to move up, go to Hart or some other establishment to expand your knowledge base. So I hope that offered some clarity in terms of what the offering is and how it works, and in terms of the reporting structure. The teachers report to our rehab manager, who reports to the rehab director, who reports to me. So that is the structure we have. There's a task force established with Ministry of Education, led by the permanent secretaries, So Minister Pavel Williams in our last meeting established that this should happen in a reasonable time. So the permanent secretaries, the CTEs are all working together to ensure that the teachers are up to par in terms of pay scale, in terms of the training, in terms of all of these things. So these are well on our way to happening. It's just, of course, as the Commission mentioned, it's going to take a little time under these conditions.
But, Chairman, Dr. Thomas, we asked earlier on, and I'm sorry you did not come in then, about what's the line of command in terms of not what is going to happen or what is happening now in terms of your dialogue with the Ministry of Education, but currently, who is supervising the teachers, what curriculum is used, what checks and balances are done to ensure that it conforms to the relevant curriculum in terms of the academics?
So the teachers report to our rehab manager, who reports to the rehab director. In terms of checks and balances,
can you slow down, doctor? We're not hearing you. We're not hearing you properly at all. The teachers report to...
They're guided by the National Standards Curriculum. So in other words, just the exact same lessons that are being taught outside the walls are being covered on the inside, right? So we can't depart. These are trained teachers and they're using the curriculum established by the Ministry of Education.
Okay.
So we can't depart from that. And as Member Crawford mentioned as well, in the adult institution, we'll utilize HSDE, high school diploma equivalency guidelines. So we are following Ministry of Education and national standards. We can't depart from that.
Who supervises?
I just wanted to do a follow-up question on that.
Who supervises them?
Go ahead.
I just want to do a follow-up question on that. I'm pleased at the kind of practical approach that you are taking, which makes sense. And I hear you answering Member Guy's question about following what is happening on the outside is exactly what is happening on the inside. And since we are extremely aware of the inequity in the education system for decades, if you say what is happening on the outside is what you're following on the inside, my question would be, does that mean that you deliver the lessons, you do the modules, but there is no real emphasis or concern about what your objectives are? Where would you want to take the students from what level to another? When I look at a report, for example, the fact that you report and say X number of students received, of the 15 per year, received 1 to 4 subjects, tell me something. Because elsewhere we don't talk about 1 to 4 subjects, Students who are doing less than 3 subjects, we think it's a problem. 5 subjects is what you would want to see for matriculation into most post-secondary institutions. So is it that we have settled in terms of what we think that they can achieve, and therefore we are just going through the routine? Or is there a real sense that this is an at-risk, marginalized population that requires a little bit more effort to get them to where we would want them to be if we were to take into account the issue of equity? I'm concerned about how that process is going. I don't know if
literally, that is why we're here. Because as you mentioned, that we need the parliamentary support to ensure that these partnerships that we're speaking of, that the task force between Ministry of Education bears some fruit. We need those teachers. We need that capacity to have wider offering. If you don't have the 5 CSEC offerings, then it's just not there. So we offer what we have, because at no point should a child not be engaged. And therefore, we offer what we have. And therefore, that's why we need the support to ensure that we can expand those offerings, have the type of teachers that we want, with the quality teachers, have the support from Ministry of Education in terms of additional monitoring and guidance. So those are type of discussions that the Commission mentioned that we have already started, and it's at the level of the permanent secretaries.
But Dr. Thomas, I gather from what you're saying, Chair, is that all of this seems like something that you want to do. Because if I am to go by the report that came from the DCS, and I'm going to read, there is limited or no supervision to ensure that lesson plans, timetables, and maintenance of attendance register are done in accordance with the standards of the Ministry of Education and Youth and the MOEY does not provide oversight of the system in the DCS. Now, that is a totally different thing from what you just told us. And we want to know is if what you have indicated to us are just aspirations as opposed to what is actually happening now, because this came from your ministry, from the DCS, and we are here as a public document now, forced to accept it. So you are telling us something totally different now. We'd like to know whether is this what is actually happening, or what you have indicated to the committee now is just an aspiration of the DCS.
I'll try to explain it further. So I would word it this way, that we want stronger standards and additional oversight. So right now, the system that I just mentioned is happening right now. Would we benefit from the roving team of officers that the Ministry of Education has? Yes. Would we benefit from a principal that could be assigned to the institution with the years of experience? Yes. So we would always benefit. And
Hold on. You cannot tell us that you're benefiting from it. And then we see here that the ministry does not provide oversight of the system at the DCS. So someone or some entity is not being as crystal clear, and I'm going to be diplomatic.
Sorry, let me step in. Mrs. Trowers would like to add.
All right, Chair, members, thank you. So maybe I could provide some clarity to this conversation. So I think Dr. Thomas was indicating that the curricula that is used is similar to, or I would want to say the same as the Ministry of Education. You are right, Member Guy, that the sort of oversight that the Ministry of Education needs to provide is not currently being provided. A small working group was tasked with providing for the synergy that you speak about, because a part of the concern, as you rightfully said, and what we recognize is that just like how we're dealing with the vulnerable and the volatile in the communities, the DCS is a community. On my other side of my portfolio, I look at crime prevention, and it is interesting because this group would be the most vulnerable and the most volatile, which we would consider the tertiary risk, and we must engage them so they can reintegrate and we don't have them cede to an adult institution or worst case, be killed. And so a part of it, the last meeting that I am aware of, and I can update the committee, was one held in September 2021 between the ministry and the Ministry of Education. And at that meeting, we highlighted, and I just want to give you an update to show the areas that we wanted to focus on. So it is a little more than just a thought or an idea. We're seeking to have it come together. One of the concerns, and I think maybe one of the hindrances outside of the pandemic, is that there has been some changes at education, and some of the persons who were aligned to that committee for our last update has left. And so we are reconvening. But the areas that we focused on were teaching and learning in terms of curriculum delivery, diagnostic testing, teaching resources, assessments, and offerings. The second thing was teacher quality, looking at qualifications, remuneration, capacity building, and whether or not they're unionized and how to treat with that and the benefit vis-a-vis the public system, similar allowances. The third thing was the structure of the system, to look at the leadership as well, and middle managers, as you indicated. It's all well and good that you have persons doing the job, but in order for us to know if they're doing the job effectively, there has to be accountability. The second to last thing was psychosocial support, and the last was supervision and quality assurance. The DCS was asked to provide certain documents to the Ministry of Education, and that was provided. So we have since provided a list of our curricular offerings, the curriculum documents, the number of teachers we have, the database of the existing qualifications of the staff, the number of inmates in the age category, and particularly looking at the 7 to 9, so grade 7 to 9 category, which would be easier to integrate in terms of formal academics vis-a-vis someone who would have reached what I would consider the end of the academic cycle. And lastly, the existing pay structure. And so my team was asked to reach out to the Ministry of Education, which they did reach out last week, to re-engage this conversation even before we're having it here. And so we're just waiting to see now, and it is at the PS level, for us to reconvene to get this moving. So you possibly could have a further update after this.
Chair.
Dr. Brownberg, your hand is still raised.
Yeah, no, I'm sorry. I'll lower it now.
Okay, then, thanks. Member Hamilton.
Chair, I just wanted, for information purposes, to find out whether or not there is any data that exists to track the progress of juveniles who have been reintegrated into communities. Do we know what happens to them afterwards? Where they are? Are they back in school? Have they committed themselves to adult correctional facilities, for example? Dr. Guy says big prison. But where are they? And I would love to know numbers, over a period of maybe 5 years, for example, to track, to see whether or not the DCS is operating as efficiently as we would love them to.
Thank you, Member. I'm not aware of DCS tracking any of the wards once they leave our facilities. I do stand corrected, but I'm not aware that we follow them through having left our care. Yes.
You say you follow them through?
No, I'm not aware that DCS keeps that data. Once they are released from our care, we do not follow their progress in the wider community.
Certainly, though, Commissioner, it is something that, and I'm glad in the absence of the permanent secretary, the CTD is here. It is something that the ministry could undertake because, as you quite correctly said, CTD, you also have oversight for other areas of the ministry outside of the DCS and the juvenile correctional component of the DCS. It would be something that could be very effective in trying to look at the root causes of the expansion of crime in the country if such a data was available to you and to the planners. So it is something that probably is worth exploring. As I had asked earlier on, have we done any data collection to see what is happening to those persons who have left, whether they have become integrated in the formal criminal activity, or they have been reintegrated into the formal non-criminal activity to be productive citizens in this country, as I had asked earlier on.
As you rightly mentioned of that situation, Member Guy, but I doubt very much that I'm getting from Commissioner if it is a part of their job or task to really monitor them after leaving there. What I would hope for is for us to create a questionnaire or to ask a ministry, whether it be the Ministry of Education or the Ministry of National Security, which this DCS falls under, sorry, to conduct a survey for the last 10, 20 years and to say what is the finding, and from there, then we could formulate something. We are now, we are now at,
if I could add,
we are now at 9 minutes to 12. We are going to take at least 2 more questions to DCS because we have another matter on the paper. And what we'll do is that we as members will tabulate all the questions and concerns because we're still not getting, we are not comfortable with what we're getting now. And so we are not going to just sweep it under the rug. We are going to continue to dig into this agency, not to find anything outside, but really to assist you, Commissioner, and your team as to how best we can serve these ward of the state so that it don't come down to a point mentioned by Member Guy wherein they end up on the wrong side of society. And so we will do our thing where the question and concerns...
including the site visit, Chair. I think that is very important.
Definitely we would really like to arrange to have a site visit of all the facilities, because it is from that site visit that we are going to get an image really of what really is out there, because I do heard you mention some challenges here, and it is a bit scary.
But Mr. Chairman.
Go ahead.
Thank you. No, I was saying if the DCS is very serious about the integration aspect, it is very useful that the DCS keeps a log of where these wards of the state go after, and just to do just a little tracking of where they are. It's not difficult to do, because again, when I served at Heart, what we did, we at Heart, we kept a log of the inmates who would have finished serving their time. And not only did we keep a log, but for example, if one of the inmates, they were at South Camp or they were at St. Catherine, wherever they were, if they're from Hanover, we have a center in Hanover. And what we did, we got reports from the DCS to hear about their behavior, and we helped to get them enrolled to continue their program in one of our facilities in the parish that they are returning to live. Because if we're going to say that our wards of the states are our neighbors tomorrow and we're serious about integration, that has to be a very important component. The DCS should at minimum do a basic tracking of where these wards go, if at least that.
Mr. Chair, if I just add for a second, certainly I'm also interested in getting a little bit more detail as well in terms of those that are to be integrated, especially where the institution or the families are refusing to take them in. And we saw that 53 of the 70 odd persons who were placed in these institutions came in because they were expelled from school, stopped going, and so on. What is not clear is at the point where they were ready for integration, if the issues that were identified when they came in, if those had been sufficiently resolved, or they thought that these individuals were at a stage to ensure that once reintegrated, they would not reoffend. That's one. And secondly, I was wondering if there was any thought given to some kind of a transitional program. The point made in the report was that some of the family members, for example, refused to take these children back because of prior behavior. And I was thinking that a transitional program would get them to kind of interact and see the behavior to be comfortable reintegrating them. So I just wanted to get a feedback from DCS about that.
Right. Thank you, Madam Member. Let me say that the information around juveniles is very sensitive, especially once that juvenile has left the correctional facility. There are strict regulations that govern how we treat with their personal information and any personal information around those wards. So as you may find, depending on the instruction of the court, a ward may be given to our care for specific periods of time, or maybe until 18. That is the window of opportunity we have to impact on their behavioral change. And their ability to reflect and reintegrate. Some wards we have more time than others. Other wards, based on the assessment of the case manager, we look at the best package that we believe will fit in to be able to show this ward an opportunity of another way of going about on a daily basis. So it varies from ward to ward in terms of how much time we have to commit to help that ward to reintegrate. But as I said earlier, beyond that, once the ward leaves our care, we are guided by strict procedures how to treat with any documentation after that.
I'm not sure if I understood the response to the question that I had asked. Let's just see, I understand the limited time. I understand that you might not be able to put in place a program that would get you the results, the optimum results you would have wanted. But I'm not sure. Does that mean that it's just a holding area? You just go through the beat, just take the steps one after the other, and wherever they are when it ends, I just start go. I'm just trying to understand.
Thank you, Member Brown. From the Ministry of National Security, maybe I could assist Commissioner. So I think Commissioner is talking about the limitations at his agency level. What we recognize at National Security, though, is that this concern for our most vulnerable and volatile is not only a national security issue. So particularly as you look at transition, we have explored the concept of transition. We've even had site visits to a transitional home that CPFSA has so that we can look at how it can be structured. A part of the government's response, and it is a part of what we consider crime prevention and crime management, is looking at social investment, and it has to be driven by the data. So the chair and the members are right. We have recognized some data gaps that we need to know. We need to know where are some of our wards from, because the concern that we've had from the ministry is that, yes, they've come into contact with the law, but are we sending them back into a situation that will further make them get into greater contact with the law? And so it's just like how we are looking at the other communities, the juveniles are seen as a community as well. And so a part of the initiative is to look at what we consider social investment, where government truly works in a synergistic way. So someone who comes to the juvenile facility, rightfully, the Ministry of Education oversees the teaching aspect. The psychosocial, we're looking at the mental health. The ministry, we've gotten some additional posts. But posts coming from then we will look at probation and how do we track them in the community. A part of that is to provide for probably social transfer. So we would look at the relationship with the Ministry of Labor. So these things are actually happening. They're happening a little slower than we would want because of the pandemic and the fiscal constraints. But I don't think Commissioner is saying, I think the particular issue with juveniles is that unlike an adult inmate that has a specific CRO, which is a number unique to that adult that allows us to track. Juveniles are sensitive and we don't keep records like that. But if the system is integrated and the persons that come to the DCS, we are able to provide for them through the social network, like the Ministry of Labor, or through education for those who can reintegrate, then we would track them. So a part of the first mandate, and that's what the ministry has asked, is that we must now seek to collect the data so that we have the data to inform going forward. So it's a part of our plans and we have started. I hope that kind of gives a little more clarity.
It gives clarity, Ms. Showers, but to be honest, I believe this should have happened before, especially with the crime rate that we have in the country. It is very alarming, and the data from DCS on page 7 that speaks to the children that were expelled from school prior to being admitted to the centers is also alarming. And that is why I think we are asking these questions, because it says here for the South Camp facility, the number of children on correctional order, 23, and the number of children that were expelled, 23. So 100% of the juveniles in that facility were not going to school. It is something that we should treat as urgent. It is not something that should just now be discussed.
And remember, it is something that needs to be treated as it is now of urgency. And so, I said before, we as a committee will now have to create a report to Parliament seeking the intervention with the ministry to create a map of all these youngsters coming into, why they are in, and after leaving, that we seek to create a database. Because also, to add to that is for the DCS to create an assessment, maybe just like a monthly report from school or an annual report as to the progress of that child, whether the child is showing sign of rehabilitation or not. And so the country will know exactly how to treat each kid leaving the facility. But at this time, we are now 3 minutes past 12, and so we will say thank you to the members from the ministry and DCS. Not that we are through with you. We will deliberate sometime, and we will find it necessary to call you back or just to send you a list of questionnaire that we would want to have answers for. Also, on the request of members, that we will seek to set up a site visit of your facilities to get a first-hand knowledge of what you have and what you have to work with. And from there, we will now then create a report. So you'll be hearing from us again, sir, madams. Thank you for being with us this morning, and you are now free to make your way back to your place of professional work. Thank you.
Thank you, Sir Chair. Let me just add that there's a window of opportunity now in that our COVID cases are low. In terms of the visit, it may be a good opportunity to get that in as quickly as possible, Sir Chair.
Contact will be made through the House of Parliament with your agency. Right. Thank you. Members, we would have received a correspondence from the University of the West Indies. Ms. Chesson Brandon, Committee Clerk, House of Parliament. Dear Ms. Brandon, I write to acknowledge receipt of your letter dated January 28, 2022. The special meeting of the Council is scheduled to meet on March 4, 2022, at which time it is expected that the report of the review of the Chancellor's Commission on Governance will be accepted and approved for implementation. The University Council will at that point name a task force.
Line that says some of the safety measures include storage area for children. What are storage areas? I'm not sure if that is what was really said. Storage area includes storage area for children. I don't think children are placed in storage areas. So we need to change that.
Equipment or food stuff for children.
Oh, well, if that is the case, then it should say so.
Right, the amendment it should be corrected.
Right, that would be it, Chair.
Chairman.
Go ahead.
Chairman.
Go ahead.
No, so I'm asking if those are the corrections that Member Hamilton had indicated she would go back to before we could officially confirm the minutes. If that's a yes, then we should now move to confirm it officially.
No, this is a separate report. This is a draft report for the Parliament.
Oh, that's not the minutes. Okay.
The question though is, Member Hamilton, have you found the amendment in the minutes that you would want to? You're comfortable? Okay, so at this time, Member Crawford is giving the hands up that we can readily confirm the minutes. And it was moved by Member Hamilton herself, seconded by Member Guy. Any other business? If there is no other business coming from the members, we look at the date for our next meeting, which would be to take the University of the West Indies, and so the clerk will be in contact with the person in charge, and we will then set a date as to when they come to see us. At this time, the meeting now stands adjourned.